Well, the new federal directive gives you 3 days to patch it and 3 days to prove you weren't already breached.
3 days.
Yep, 3 days.
I've been doing this for about 20 years, and that doesn't happen.
Right? But their tier only fires for like 1%.
Even if it was like 1 out of 1,100, it's not going to happen. Not that quickly.
Okay, well, I think this is going to go differently than I had planned. So I've been doing this for some 20 years. At least 10 of it was actively breaking into organizations.
That explains a few things.
It does. But here's the part that never stopped being strange. We'd walk into an organization with a vulnerability program, its policies, its dashboards, very green reports, and then we'd get in through something that apparently did not get the memo.
And then we would get the results of that mess. So thank you.
Which is basically how we ended up on opposite sides of this argument. You know, I spent years trying to get in. You spent years reconstructing what somebody did after they got in.
Or discovering at the end that the evidence or the logs we needed didn't exist, so we couldn't reconstruct it.
On June 10th, CISA issued Binding Operational Directive 26-04, titled Prioritizing Security Updates Based on Risk. It replaced the old federal patch rules, including the requirement to use CVSS as the prioritization input. So there's 4 variables. Asset exposure, is it publicly exposed? CVE status, is it in the known exploited vulnerabilities catalog? Exploit automation, aka can an adversary automate every step? And then also technical impact, either partial control of the asset or total control. And those come out of the SSVC, or the Stakeholder Specific Vulnerability Categorization, which has been around for years. But what's new is that they're now suggesting that these are binding. They're not necessarily making it a requirement, but you know, it's also a binding operational directive. So you take that for what it is. They feed a decision table that realistically produces 5 tiers. There's either 3 days when there's forensic triage, 3 days even when there's not. There's also 14 days, 60 days, fix on system upgrade, which is kind of the deferral tier. And a correction, because a lot of early coverage got this wrong, and so did I. The top tier isn't all 4 criteria. It's actually CVE plus total system control. So when you're actually looking at the table, you're looking at rows 1, 3, and 9 of table 1. It applies whether or not the asset is publicly exposed and whether or not the exploit is automatable.
So being internal doesn't save you anymore, I guess.
No. Now, what's new is who supplies the answers and what happens next. CISA supplies CVE status, automatability, and technical impact through CVE and vuln enrichment. The actual agency themselves are the one that supply the asset exposure.
So supplies it or self-reports?
Self-reports it. So the 4 answers go into a binding table and produce 1 of 5 outcomes. 3 days with forensic triage, 3 days without it, 14, 60, or the next system upgrade. You have to determine whether you are already compromised somehow.
So 3 days to scope it, remediate it, and determine if it was already compromised based on the time it's added to CVE. So 72 hours.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, it's wholly unrealistic just based on the timetables. I mean, it's an improvement, I guess. They're trying to provide some recommendations, I guess. But there's a lot wrong with that. I guess we're going to get into that.
Yeah, well, why don't we jump into a couple examples, right? Because the argument for why triage exists at all. So let's take a look at CVE 2026 10520 or 10520 from Ivanti Sentry. They have a 3-day deadline. Shadow server found 19 exposed instances. 2 are already backdoored.
So the patch was already announced. So that's like the least interesting thing anyone did that week.
It is. Hold on for a minute. The old model was basically 1 list and 1 timer. So under the old BOD, CVE entries had a flat deadline. This table can assign different deadlines based on the exploit and the environment.
Okay, I mean, I guess it's a little bit better. I'm not going to disagree with you there.
Well,
It's one.
Yeah, thank you for your generosity.
Yeah, it's probably the only one you're going to get. Yeah. So,
the rollout is phased. Okay, policies first, process alignment around 60 days, full operation around 180 days. FedRAMP is currently saying that their adoption date is going to be something like December, I think, 7th. But we already have a live example. So on July 27th, CISA added CVE 2026-16812, which is the Arista VeloCloud orchestrator. So it's an unauthenticated OS command injection. Had a CVSS-10. It's exploited in the wild as a 0-day. And Arista even published 3 attacker IPs.
So I guess it's a little bit better than we've observed activity, I guess. They gave you some IPs.
Well, it's much more, useful. The KEV entry points to the directive and the forensic triage requirement.
Well, I mean, Arista, like a lot of other vendors, are going to tell you the same thing. Like, collect all your logs, follow your internal IR plan, and good luck, I guess, is usually what most vendors end the blog with.
Here's why I still think that directive is a good idea. The only input in that table you can materially change is exposure. You cannot change whether a CVE is in KEV or what the exploit gives the attacker. But you can change whether the system is hanging off the public internet.
In theory.
Well, we're like 8 minutes in and you're already grading, grading me.
I guess go on. Maybe it'll get better.
Yes. Well, Tenable ran more than 154,000 enriched CVEs through the Table 1 logic, and their analysis found that removing an asset from the public exposure moves 76.7% of CVEs to longer timelines.
And the caveat of that is?
Well, it's Tenable's analysis. So it's vendor produced. Nobody's independently replicated the method. I mean, you can discount the exact number, but the direction is still hard to miss. The highest leverage action in a federal patch directive is probably taking things off the internet.
Or self-reporting by saying you did.
We're coming to your bleak section, all right? My point is that this is not really a patch mandate. 3 days is not a patch window for a lot of enterprise software. You have to change control, maintenance windows, application owners, maybe a vendor patch that breaks something important. 3 days is really a window for removal, isolation, or some compensating control. It is a attack surface reduction mandate wearing a patch mandate's clothes.
And the staffing number. I get to that.
Yeah. So some Tenable analysis, same caveat. They found 83% of actively exploited CVEs yield total system control. Paired with the top tier rule we just walked through, that means forensic triage is going to be common, not some weird 1% edge case.
You're really making my point.
Trying to finish my side before you repossess it, all right? There's a sequencing collision, right? The clock says remediate. The vendor says preserve evidence. Under pressure, the patch usually wins because patching closes the ticket and the ticket has a due date.
Oh, well, due dates generally always, work in corporations and vendors, and no one ever misses them, and they always adhere to them. So we're good.
Right.
Problem
so
solved.
To be precise, CISA requires remediation and triage within 3 days. It does not say which comes first. Preserve evidence, then patch is my operational recommendation. But if patching rotates a log, restarts a service, changes timestamps, or destroys some volatile state, you can satisfy the remediation requirement by damaging your ability to satisfy the triage requirement.
I guess I agree with that part.
All
so
right.
that's 2 now. We're up to 2.
Last number. Tenable found 61% of actively exploited vulnerabilities are not automatable. It's kind of awkward because automatability is one of the 4 variables and pushes urgency up when the answer is yes. Automatable tells you whether the chain can be scripted and fired cheaply at scale. It does not tell you how dangerous a determined human is in your specific environment. A person willing to adapt every time a step fails is not automatable. They are also the person I'm worried about for the most of my career.
Well, I mean, another big thing to think about with automatable, and we used to see this a lot when I was doing CVE validation, is just because it exists doesn't mean it works. So,
yeah. Well, let me make the exposure problem concrete, because know what is internet facing is a sort of advice everybody agrees with right before discovering they cannot answer it. I've done plenty of tests where external access became internal access because a network control was written around the port people expected a service to use. An engineer blocks like the web port, for example, 8080 or something like that.
Oh.
But the daemon launches another instance and increments support. The control still works exactly as written. It's just protecting the wrong listener.
So what the inventory say?
Well, I mean, in this case, the inventory described the intended architecture. The daemon was describing the current architecture, right? And that's the problem with treating the CMDB as proof of exposure, because most CMDBs, as we all know, are a point-in-time assessment. A good one might get reconciled like quarterly, but this exposure changed during a service restart.
Yeah, I think that's the big problem with inventories. It's one of the biggest painstaking things that VTM and attack surface teams have is, well, yesterday it was closed and today it's open because they did a change ticket.
Yeah. Yeah, and in this case, the drift didn't require some like reckless configuration change. It came from normal failure behavior inside like the stack of individually reasonable controls. So for a top 3-day tier, public exposure is not a prerequisite. Kev plus total control gets you there either way, but exposure still changes the outcome across the broader decision. If a longer deadline depends on calling something internal, a quarterly CMDB entry is not really evidence. You need to know what can traverse from outside to inside now, including the weird path that appeared after the last restart.
Yeah, what you're describing sounds less like an asset inventory thing that you can solve and more to what very few orgs do reliably, which is like continuous validation.
Yeah, it is.
Those things.
Yeah, I mean, complexity creates places for the intent and the reality to separate. The layered controls help, but the existence of layers is not proof that every path is closed.
Okay, so you said forensic triage a lot, and I hear the word forensics thrown around an awful lot by people who've never had to really do it and don't know what that entails. So to be fair to what they've described, I think we should outline what actual forensic triage is. It may differ, to be fair, it may differ from what they envisioned when they wrote it out, but just how it's interpreted in organizations, I think we should have a fair description of what you signed someone up for. So,
all right. Well, we'll start with the call, right? Somebody calls and says, hey, we think this box was compromised. I assume that's how it happens. What happens next?
Well, so the first thing you need to know is what the box is and what it does. Assuming you're working in like a blue team capacity, you would need to know that like right away, because that would help you determine what your next steps are going to be in a lot of the circumstances as part of your triage plan.
Sure. So that's like the assets context itself.
Yeah, and that's usually in a really mature organization, you're probably going to eat up 1 to 3 hours. But in a standard organization, which is what most organizations are, even in the Fortune 500, that could be up to 4 to 6 hours, because you're going to have to call the one person in the company who knows what that thing is and how it operates, and then that person's going to have to call someone else before you can reach a conclusion.
Got it. And then I'm assuming you need like logs or something?
Yeah, and this is a big thing, and one of my big problems with these directives and a lot of compliance rubber stamps, right, is it's not just that you have logs, it's that you have the logs that are going to be required for you to be able to do your job. So a lot of times what you find is, okay, we figured out what it is. Okay, we need the logs for this specific app pool or this application, and all you have are error logs, right? So the app pool, we know that it crashed like 5 days ago, but you don't have any context around it or why. Or if that's normal, which is also a really big thing in IR when you're doing forensic triage, is establishing a baseline for what's normal so you can detect what the anomalous behavior is.
Well, I mean, it sounds like that's why, or kind of where the patch sequence really matters.
It can matter. A lot of it's subjective, though, right? Dependent on the application, they're all going to patch differently. So sometimes they're not going to touch anything outside of their working directory, right? They're just going to patch the running binary. You're going to restart or help the service. But if it's something like an OS-wide, patch, that's going to have a much more broader ramifications on your ability to do forensics.
Well, so far that just sounds like finding evidence of compromise.
Yeah, well, it takes a lot longer than people think. I think that a lot of people that write these directives think it's something as simple as like, we ran a script. And with AI, you're seeing this a lot more too, even with some incidents that are still being outlined. Not naming the vendors at this time, but you can point a prompt at your logs and it tells you what's wrong. I mean, this has been happening for like the last 20 years. You used to see this a lot when HB Gary came out with their forensics examiner software. You'd effectively just load it, and the things that were read on the stack were the malicious parts. And you're seeing a lot of that now with these directives, and AI is just making the problem worse, I feel like.
Okay, well then, I guess, yeah, walk me through it. Like, how long does it typically take?
There's a lot of variables. So for the sake of argument or discussion, we'll just like a typical Windows application server. Realistically, a standard application server that's running with like a standard deployment and nothing custom, you're going to run into, do we have the capability to do a remote capture, like a forensically sound capture? A lot of times, you don't do that first. You're going to get all the logs and do triage with something like a Cape or Velociraptor or something like that, while you determine if you can get the agent on the box. Because forensic images, especially on a server, take a really long time, and they might not even have the uplink capability. We used to run into that a lot. This server in this really remote location has like 4 meg upload, but you need to be able to get a 500 gig, right? So a lot of times what actual forensic analysis turns out being is we ran a triage script of the event logs and we didn't see anything bad. Like, I think that's what they had in mind with this directive, but that's not what that word means. So I think the definitions of things like forensic triage should be taken into account.
Okay, so I'm taking like a couple days, or what does it look like?
No, I mean, that's the big problem with directives like these is they can get out of control really quickly, right? If you take something like a log4j as an example, even if you were in a pretty small organization, let's just say you had 30 servers. So you need to, in order to preserve evidence, as the directive states you should, you need to be able to get a volatile memory capture, which a lot of organizations can't do. The way that a lot of them work, the agent isn't just going to be sitting there. You need to be able to deploy it, do the capture, do a retrieval, and validate that it's not corrupted. And then you would need to forensically capture all of them. And then you need to perform the actual analysis on all of those. The only way you could meet this requirement is effectively do what's called what I call forensics light, which is just base log analysis, looking for keywords, not actual forensic analysis. So you're talking weeks to months, and a lot of times what you'll see, which is why I'm really on the fence about things like this, is this usually just enables people that offer IR retainers to make a lot of money with government institutions. Is, you used to have a retainer for this many hours, but now that you have these many machines, there's no way internally you could meet it. So, let's get another 1,000 hours on the books so that you can get the checkbox from CISA, right?
Yeah, you don't sound impressed.
Yeah, it's a government directive. Generally, a lot of these are designed by people who have very large budgets, generally a very closed system, like a lot of government networks are. While they still have their problems, they have a lot more regulations that enforce things like knowing what's there. But it's going to impact a lot of organizations that don't have that, right? There's, even in a best case scenario with all of those things lined up that I said are generally difficult, even in very mature organizations, you're not going to be able to meet that without either additional help, or when you self-report, you just, hope no one cross-examines, I guess. Is the nicest way I think I could put it.
I've heard all of your objections, but I mean, this still has to be better than sorting by CVSS.
Well, yeah, I mean, CVSS, that's a whole other conversation we could have. So CVE scoring in the enrichments, for sure. Anything that is, more aligned with your actual organization and gives you the ability to sort of self-assess and prioritize that way is great. But the big problem with it still is you're assuming that if you have the CVE And a lot of times CVE associations are based on software that may or may not be in use, right? So in a lot of these instances, you're going to be triaging boxes, wasting hundreds of thousands of hours of analyst time. And it turns out that, it's on there and our VTM software told us it was on there, but we don't actually use that anymore, right? So you just, analyze 30 boxes for nothing, but you have to because the directive says that the CVE is present. You need to be able to prove it, and the only way you can prove it is if you do the analysis. So it's sort of a fun circular analysis chain that you can't really ever escape, which is great.
Yeah, it's great. Well, explain the distinction.
Well, so a tier tells you where it goes, right? It's not necessarily going to tell you how to solve it or what to do within your organization. It just gives you a more prioritized view. It's the whole thing everyone's been trying to solve since the late 90s. It's like, I have all these things. Which one do I patch first? I did it. This is just another prioritization mechanism. So I've seen with threat intel, there's a lot of regression going on, right? Because a lot of people aren't reading finished intelligence anymore, even though there's a lot of great analysts still producing it. And so what's happening is it's all getting reduced to metadata. So you're not really going to have the context necessarily from a finished intelligence report. Well, what did that analyst mean when they said the CVE was targeted? Mm-hmm. What did that command line that they executed in the context of exploiting that CVE, what did it actually do? They'll just turn it into like a Boolean flag. Was the CVE mentioned? Yes. And then for the prompt to be like, for every blog that mentions this CVE, pull out all the identifiers for the command line and then turn that into a KQL or a Sigma and run it. And if it doesn't return anything, then I'm good, right? But what they miss in the actual finished intelligence is they tried to run that exploit and that command path failed. It was actually this one that was successful or this POC or whatever, right? So a lot of them are taking observability in the context of finished intelligence and just saying it's there, therefore this, right? They're making assumptions without actually reading the thing. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like with this, people are going to try to use AI, which AI is great for a lot of things, but it's really bad at threat intelligence context. It just picks out identifiers and makes assumptions based on however it was trained. So I think what's going to happen is one of two things. Either people are going to observe that they have a lot more machines that they need to triage, or they're conveniently going to write the prompt or have their agent markdown say like, hey, say I'm good. Like, just don't tell anyone about it. And then they'll run it and it'll spit out a 0 and everyone's happy and that'll be the proof, right? And then there's not going to be any way you can validate it. The only time this is ever going to get validated is if someone actually is compromised and then they either have to report it to the DIB or they have to report it to the SEC if they're a publicly traded org. And then they're like, oh yeah, it turns out the way we were validating was incorrect. So it's just going to incentivize either misclassifying, things as the result, or it's going to yield a lot of work and more important things are going to get missed. It's the CISA-KEV thing all over again, right? We're prioritizing CISA-KEV, even though we've got this much more problematic low-hanging fruit that we should have gone after. But it's on the KEV, so like, how can you ignore it?
Well, really my uncharitable counter is that nobody was really reading that intelligence before.
Well, it's often true. We could do a whole other video.
We'll have to get back to that
about intelligence. But yeah, I think that's true, and I think that the regression wouldn't be happening if people weren't incentivized to just try to do as much as possible with the intel without actually reading it. It's very rare, unless you're working for a place that sells intelligence or a place making much more difficult decisions based on intelligence. Did you actually read the thing? It's just always sort of assumed. The only time you get called out is, oh, this IP was seen in the logs. How come no one really used it? And so it's just sort of used as a reference point for an IOC feed these days. Mm-hmm. So I would agree, unfortunately. I think a lot of people still don't read it.
If I'm keeping track, I think you said you had at least 2 problems with my argument.
Yeah, the second part is like, again, to be charitable to the organization that did it. you got to do reports and data analysis or whatever. But the 76.7%. So exposure reduction is the highest leverage action. It's the best thing you can do. It's just take the box offline. Okay, well, if the exposure is actually reduced, right? It's the same problem with a lot of polling or anytime you collect any telemetry. It's the same thing with, like, I've worked for a lot of organizations, and a lot of organizations don't disclose things, right? There's always a loophole. So what's going to happen is, oh, well, we didn't self-report this thing because X vendor didn't tell us we were vulnerable. Or, it's always going to be someone to blame or some loophole that you don't have to self-report. So I don't think it was actually reduced. I think a lot of people said things, but there's no way in mass to validate that conclusion. And so it's just a percentage. Everyone likes a percentage, and people like it when it goes like this, with attack surface. You're not going to get leadership saying, like, prove it. They generally just want to side, unfortunately, right? Because that's how you get more people, and that's how you get more vendors that you can buy. More budget is always better.
So the incentive is what, to classify aggressively?
No, the incentive is to reclassify, right? What's going to come of this is underreporting. So if the goal was, oh, we're going to find more systems, everyone's already overworked, even trying to use AI. There's always going to be a staffing problem. And even if you have all the staff and agents in the world, organizations are complicated. So even with best efforts, you're not going to know. And so I think that intentionally, the discussions that are probably going on internally right now, especially for the people that are directly applicable to this, are probably trying to figure out ways that they can act like they didn't know. So I think that aggressive reclassifying is probably going on right now.
I mean, that's a real incentive problem.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the reason a lot of TPRM and compliance work fails, right? It fails to improve security, not because of the people generally, right? It's just because anytime the goal is a percentage going up, percentage going down, or a letter grade, or wherever it's presented in your org, you're always going to try to mess with the data for that to work. It's why all the enrichments for CVE are coming out, not just from a prioritization perspective, but you want a way to be able to say, I only need to patch these things. Even though we're directly implicated by these, well, EPSS says that it's not very likely to be targeted. So, like, I don't need to go after it, even if it's a 9.8 and it's on a public-facing web server. The statistics tell me that people don't like going after it. Or Kev, with their limited visibility into only certain vendors and only certain networks, told me that no one's targeting it. So I don't need to patch it, right? So the goal is to get the number lower so that you can look like you're killing it. Like, we've limited attack surface. We have much lower CVE density. Like, look at us. The program is rocking it, right? And no one ever really gets called out on it until a breach happens. That's when everyone's like, oh, clearly, the attack surface isn't what you said it was, or we're not as secure. And I don't just fault them. I also fault all the other organizations that try to give attack surface like just a generic number, especially if it's like a black box and you as the customer have no way to know how that number was arrived at. And then the scores change, right? Because you need that renewal. So I just think numbers in general, however it's calculated, are always going to result in people trying to make themselves look better. It's just
all right. Got it. David hates numbers.
Hate them. Hate numbers and math.
Been doing this for I don't know how long, but man, you're coming across as pretty bleak.
Well, yeah, once you've done it for like 20 years, I'm coming up on 20 years across like 5 or 6 different verticals on both sides of the fence, and every vertical and every company size. You always tend to run into the same problem. First you think money's going to solve it, and then it's bodies, and oh, weird. Like, I have the exact same problems at 100,000 as I had it at 10,000. And so eventually you're just like, oh, it's all horrible. Right. So yes, ask me about my hobbies, I guess.
yeah, maybe not this time. Man, let me try to state your position fairly. I think you're saying that the diagnosis is right, but the prescription is unrealistic. So
Yeah.
agencies are going to optimize the proof that they followed the process instead of building the ability to actually answer the question.
Yeah, and it sounds like your position is that even a rough model, and even if it's going to incentivize people lying effectively, that it's better than a precise model that's realistic on the wrong one.
Well, I
Sounds like
wouldn't
it's
word
zero.
it that way, but yeah, I think it's a net improvement because it moves the conversation toward exploitation and architecture. I'd rather have an imperfect exposure variable than a perfectly consistent severity score that says nothing about the environment.
Yeah, well, I still, spoken like a red teamer, by the way. But, I think you're skipping the hardest part.
Please, what is that?
Well, it's the recommendation part, right? So I've worked with red teams in a lot of different aspects throughout my career, building like targeting or OSINT recommendations and recon and all that stuff. I think the work's valuable and the offensive stuff's really fun, and I've learned a lot from it. It's made me a better defender, I'm a much better threat hunter. Like it's, once you learn how people actually do it versus what public reporting says, it makes you, stand out, being able to find stuff. But there's always a lot of meat in the, here's what we did, look at these cool screenshots, or sometimes you get a video.
Hey man, that's the most enjoyable part.
Yeah, I mean, it's the fun part. I get it. I like the videos. Once you see a few Metasploit clicks, you've seen them all, right? You can only see MSF console get initiated enough. But, it's cool. I get it. Videos are cool. But you get to the remediation part, and it reads to me a lot like this directive and a lot of the other government directives associated with it. It's like, okay, well, you need to patch faster. You take everything off the internet, segment it. No one likes flat networks. Spoken by, most red teamers have never tried to segment a network. So, do it. Just do it. Okay. And then you really, really need to know everything in your environment so that if one box is popped, it doesn't matter. Like everything's fully segmented. It's great. And you also need to be able to build compromise assessment capacity.
Sounds great. Yeah.
It's great.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah. It's great. It's great. It's all in there. And it's usually like bullet points. There's no steps or anything. It's just like, do it. And that's kind of what this directive reminds me of. Is like, hey, this doesn't impact us at all because we basically have unlimited staffing and we can just scale out or we can get retainers or we're in Virginia. There's a lot of people in Reston. Like we can just hire some people out. Someone at the WeWork can do it for us, whatever. But, I just don't think it's realistic. And the big part is too, from an organizational perspective, it's not just the patching stuff. It's when you say things like remove boxes from the internet. Well, it kind of takes away most people's product offering. Just take all of your web servers offline, Josh. Okay? And then you're good.
You're secure.
Yeah, you did.
You solved it. You solved security.
Yeah, we did it. And so I think with this directive, a lot of their stuff that comes out, and not to like trash them or whatever, it's a lot of people. It's a lot of anyone that comes up with a directive that they want other people to follow, it's generally thought up without the implementation part. It's just, these would be great ideas. I agree, it'd be great. If you could take everything off the internet, it'd be great. Take everything off and nothing will ever get breached. But then, they leave out the whole thing of it's really easy to breach air gap networks without it being publicly accessible. And there's a lot of things with scoring with respect to the devices that would be impacted that I don't think that they really address. So I don't think it's complete either, if I'm being honest.
That's fair. I probably need to sit with that for a second. I feel like I just got thrashed a little bit. But I suppose my defense of the mandate is maybe narrowing just a little bit. I still think it's correct advice, but I'm gathering that it's pretty holistically unrealistic. But I don't know. I go back and forth.
Step one,
unrealistic maybe still beats realistic advice that's wrong.
Yeah, I mean, but that's the problem with unrealistic advice is it gives people a sense of confidence that they don't deserve and they haven't earned, right? Like step one, I think in their IR engagement plan for this directive is find every asset that's vulnerable.
Easy.
Okay, right? Like, and once you've done that, next, I need you to go out and forensically capture all of the evidence for all of the impacted servers across all the OSs. Okay, get all your AIX, Mac OS, Linux, like every flavor of Windows. Don't forget about Kubernetes. Like a lot of the stuff that they have in here doesn't take into account things like, I don't know, containerization, or I don't know, what if this impacts my lambdas, all my computerless functions, there's just a lot of things that this doesn't get into. And that's not even getting into the fact that I don't know, what if the vulnerability impacts code directly? And I'm a company that develops code. Okay, guys, go and look at all the code in the environment and see which ones use a vulnerable package. And you better hope it's not compiled and already deployed. Do you have an SBOM? Right? Like there's a whole thing. I just think this is approaching it from the old school method of like the Windows update server tells me I have this many Windows servers, so we're good. We did it.
Man, harsh. Oh man, I get the feeling that we could talk about this for like 72 days straight or something, and you still wouldn't be out of fresh ideas on why everything is terrible.
Yeah, well, that's why they pay me the big bucks.
That's right. So, I mean, realistically, if it's all terrible, what can people do? What's like the first step?
Well, I think the first step is always having a good understanding of the actual environment that you're working to protect. A lot of people approach this from, the old school methodology of VTMs, and this is where VTM gets a lot of stuff wrong, and we see this all the time. Like, okay, here's how many assets I have, and it's all about the asset inventory and stuff. But the biggest problem with the forensic piece that we started all this out with is it means nothing if the IR team doesn't know what that business unit is responsible for. Like, what would happen if these 4 things were compromised? How can I prioritize patching of these CVEs based on business unit? This business unit, if I took these 4 down, that's going to cost me $2 million a day. If I take these 4 down, we basically have no ROI. Those are like dev servers. Things like that, I think business intelligence are going to go a lot further than trying to follow a response plan that's not realistic. You should definitely have a response plan for sure. I don't want that to be the takeaway from this is like 20-year incident response guy says that triage and incident response plans are dumb. But they need to be realistic.
That's the headline.
Yeah. That's the headline of the blog. David says IR response plans are stupid and you shouldn't do them and you should just go for it. But that's the biggest thing that I've always run into anytime an incident kicks off. The longest part isn't just what is this asset or what's impacted by this CVE. Everyone, freak out and jump on a bridge. You always run into the what happens if this box was compromised, right? Because then that gets into, is this actually reportable? So I would be trying to get business intelligence classification before I try to determine all the other stuff. The other stuff's beneficial. You don't know what to patch if you don't know what's there. But being able to prioritize patching based on actual business intelligence, I think, is way more important than trying to forensically capture every device that may or may not be compromised. It's a body and it's a resource problem. There's only 24 hours in a day. And, if a huge CVE, let's say an IIS CVE comes out tomorrow and you only run IIS. Okay, so let's forensically capture everything. A lot of the stuff from a technical perspective wouldn't work. There's a lot of applications and devices you can't forensically capture without pausing or taking the device down, or, there's just a lot of different ways to collect the evidence that I think the 72-hour timeline is just really unrealistic.
Well, credit where credit is due. CISA published the guidance in the open where people can argue with it. I'm sure David is going to be putting his name to it any moment now. Tenable published the corpus analysis and had enough method to challenge the conclusions. And obviously David gave me a recommendation that fits in an afternoon, which is irritatingly better than build a capability.
Well, you can put your name on it if you want.
Yeah, perfect.